Hello, everyone. My name is Dr. Taquina Davis, and I am the managing partner with Healthy Strategies. So, in honor of Men's Health Month, we will be continuing our Uncovering Recovery series. So, today we will be speaking with Mr. Michael Robertson, who will be sharing his recovery story. Mr. Michael, first of all, we want to say thank you for being able to be here to share your story. And we are so honored that you are willing to, just share some time and just share some words of wisdom and also just being able to be transparent to tell us your journey when it comes to addiction. So I'm just going to pause and I'm just going to allow you to introduce yourself and then also just let us hear what you have to say when it pertains to your recovery journey.
Great. Thank you, TQ. I really appreciate it. This is truly an honor, and I don't take it for granted anytime I get to share my story. I take that as a time that I'm being used by God, and I try to decrease that He might increase. And I believe in being transparent because the mission is to help someone in this process of recovery. The mission is to help someone. I was saved that I might be able to go out and help save someone else. I truly believe that. And when we talk about recovery, it does my heart a lot of good because I have to think back on my journey in this process. So I thank you for an opportunity to share this. And I always like to say that I'm not trying to impress anyone, but I want to leave an impression on you that I might be able to help, that this process truly works. This process truly works. And when I look at the disease of addiction, I have to go back a long way in this process, on how it affected me as a child coming up. But first, I like to explain, like, the disease of addiction stands for two things. Okay. We talk about the obsession and the compulsion. How we obsess on getting one, and once I get one, I got to have another one and another one and another one. You believe it or not, we learned about this as little children growing up. We just didn't know the disease of addiction, the obsession and compulsion. We were sitting down watching TV one day, and a commercial came on, and that commercial said, "Lay's potato chips. I bet you can't eat just one." So I try to look at that from the point of the disease of addiction. And so I want you to go on a small journey with me back as a child when I was one of the smallest in the family, but I was very energetic kind of kid, And I remember my mother being a single parent. I remember we had a family reunion once, and you know how people sit around and talk, and I overheard them as a kid saying that my mother would have a hard time raising my sister and I because she was a single parent. And I was a mama's boy, and that bothered me. So every contest that we had with the kids and everything we did, I did my best to outshine all the other kids because I wanted to show them the good job that my mother was doing, and that was like one of the ups of my life, the high times of my life. And as life went on, I remember my mother met this man and she got married and she was happy. And it was a thrill for me to see my mother's happy. I'm a mama's boy. And he was from Swansea, South Carolina. We used to go down there and run behind them chickens and hogs and act the fool, my sister and I. And in the daytime, it was fun. But at nighttime, for me, it was like a horror movie. Okay. See, I had an uncle who used to fondle me. And, I didn't know nothing about homosexuality, gay, or nothing. All I knew that as a kid, this wasn't right. And I wanted to tell my mother about it. But my thinking as a child that if I told my mother, then she would be so angry that she might leave my stepfather, and then she wouldn't be happy anymore. So rather than tell her, I hid this inside, and I didn't know the effect of that one event would have on me growing up through life. It put me in the mood to have to suffer from things like low self-esteem, insecurity, and always feeling that I wasn't good enough or worthy enough to do certain things, that I would start something, but I never would finish because my mind would tell me that you're not supposed to be doing this. I could never give myself credit for enough. And as time went on, I remember, I had little jobs as a kid. I would do things to try to lift up. I had my first job was in like the first or the second grade, bagging the 2 for a penny cookies at the little neighborhood store. I made 25 cents a day. If y'all think I was getting beat with 25 cents, you could buy a soda, a honey bun, and a nickel whipper cookies, and they was 2 for a penny. And so, and I would buy that every day. And I remember my mother telling me once, she said, son, you're going to always know how to make money. She said, but you ain't going to save a dime. You spend it all before you get home. But as time went on and I went through that period I was telling you about with the low self-esteem and the insecurity, and I got to high school, as kids, we started off, drinking a little wine and doing things. But I remember in high school when we stuck these 2 pieces of paper together and then put a green leafy substance in it. I remember that clear. I was a freshman in high school. I remember rolling up, twisting, and licking it. And I always like to say I lit it up in the 9th grade. I lit one in. And when I blew the smoke out, I was a senior in high school. I don't know what else happened. My life was centered around, because our literature tells us that with the disease of addiction, it was fun in the beginning. First thing I smoked made me laugh like crazy. It was fun in the beginning, but then the euphoria wore off. And we got to see the ugly side of addiction, and that's where life changed. I remember being a senior in high school, and it was time for the SAT, and I didn't know nothing. I hadn't learned nothing. I got high all 4 years of my high school, and I remember cheating my way through the SAT. I found a way to do that. I found a way that I was going to copy half of somebody's paper and guess the other half. And it went well. I remember copying the paper and got that right. But the problem was when I guessed, I got that right too. Excuse me. And I got that right too. And they called me into the guidance council. She said, Michael, we are sorry that we neglected you for these 4 years. We did not know that you were capable of such a score, that we need to do something to prepare you for any college that you want to go to, because the score we're looking at is really great. It was at that time, TQ, I decided to join the United States Navy because they was about to find out I was dumber than a box of rocks. I didn't know anything. But I went off into the military, and that's where life changed for me. I got in the military, and everywhere I went, I would enjoy the culture. But the amazing part about it, I would find the drugs. And that process went on for 4 years in the military, that no matter where I went, I could always find the drugs. And that's how life went on and on and on. And after 4 years in the military of getting out and coming home and coming back to Columbia, South Carolina, and going back to those same spots that I left and continuing the same process time and time again as the drugs began to progress and started to take over my life. And at that time, I made a decision. I went back in the military because I figured it was something wrong. So I didn't go in the Navy this time. I went into the Army. And as I went in the Army, I started doing good. My life changed. Now I'm getting stationed at Fort Jackson, Columbia, South Carolina. I got 11 years in, 9 years before retirement. I like to say that I was pitching in high cotton then at that time. Life was really good. And do you know, TQ, I went back to that same corner to show everybody how good I was doing. And in the military, the habit increased again. And it started time and time again. And I got to tell you this. I had a friend of mine. I was snorting drugs at that time, and he was an intravenous drug user. And I remember that man looking at me, and he said this to me. This was an addict. He said, Mike, whatever you do, don't stick this needle in your arm. I'll never forget those words. But I was in control, TQ. I was buying the liquor. I was buying the drug. I was going to do it my way. And I remember that first shot. Okay, TQ, are you with me?
Oh my God.
Okay, we're going to start over or what?
Hey everyone, my name is Dr. Taquina Davis, and I am the managing partner with Healthy Strategies. And so, in honor of Men's Health Month, we are continuing our Uncovering Recovery series. So, today we are speaking with Mr. Michael Robertson, who will be sharing his recovery story. Mr. Michael, first of all, we want to say thank you for taking the time out to share your story with us and just to be open and transparent. So, I'm just going to take a pause for the calls and allow you to introduce yourself and just go ahead and just tell us your recovery story.
Great. Hello, TQ. How you doing? I really want to thank you for this opportunity just to share my story. I really don't take it lightly. You know, recovering the disease of addiction is serious business. And we have to attack it like the enemy. And I always like to tell people this when we talk about the disease of addiction. I like to make it clear. We talk about two things: the obsession and compulsion. The obsessions for anything, anything. It don't even have to be the drugs. The obsession. Once I obsess over it and I get a taste of it, the compulsion kicks in, which means I want another one and another one and another one. I like to always tell people, say, we learned about this a long time ago when we were children. We were watching TV and a commercial came on. That commercial said, Lay's potato chips. I bet you can't eat just one. And that's where the process of knowing about the disease addiction started for me. Life was really exciting to me. And in order for me to tell you my story, I have to go back. And I try to be as transparent as possible. So, when the things I say, I hope I don't offend anyone, but you need to know truly about the disease and how it affects someone. In order to defeat your enemy, you got to know about your enemy. And the disease of addiction is an enemy. It is a spirit of lust. And we have to learn how to attack certain spirits. So, like as a little kid, I was a happy-go-lucky kid. I was always excited. I liked to do a lot of things. I was a mama's boy. In the first grade, I had a job I was telling someone about, that I worked at a little store, the neighborhood store. We had neighborhood stores then on the corners. And the store was Little Pig Market. And the lady that worked there was a lady by the name of Miss Mary. And Miss Mary would allow me to come in and bag up the cookies and give the kids the honey buns and the sodas. And listen, I made 25 cents a day. And if you think that she was beating me out of my money with 25 cents, y'all, I could buy a soda, a honey bun, and a nickel worth of cookies, and they was 2 for a penny. So every day I made 25 cents. Every day I got that soda, honey buns, and cookies, and I would go home. And I remember my mother telling me, she said, son, you're going to always know how to make money. The problem is you're not going to save a dime. You would spend it all before you get home. And life was exciting like that. I remember at a family reunion, I heard some of the adults, the family members, talking about my mother, and they were saying it must be hard for her to raise those 2 children as a single parent by herself without a husband. When I heard this, it affected me to the point to where I made a decision in my life at that time that all the events that the kids played in, everything we did, I was going to come in first on everything. I wanted to shine. I wanted to show them that my mama was raising us properly. And things were going good. And I used to look at my mother. I knew she was a hard-working lady as a single parent. And she would come home and she would be tired sometimes. But I remember she met this man, and he was a good man. I remember, as a matter of fact, I'm glad I got to say this part. It was a song out then at that time, and the name of the song was Color Him Father. I think I'll color him father. And that song reminded me of him. And my mother married this man and made her very happy, right? And he was from Swansea, South Carolina. We used to go down the country and chase the chickens and hogs and run around and play, my sister and I. And in the daytime, it was fun. But there was something that went on at night. It was like a horror movie for me. That I had an uncle at that time who would follow me as a kid. And I wanted to tell my mother about this, right? That it was going on. But my thinking as a child was, if I told my mother, it would hurt her so and make her so mad that she would leave my stepfather, and then she wouldn't be happy anymore. So rather than tell her that, I hid that inside of me. And things started to happen. I didn't realize it, that at that time I started suffering from some things like low self-esteem and insecurity and feeling I wasn't good enough. And why is this being done to me? Like it wasn't about, I didn't know anything about homosexuality. Okay, I didn't know nothing about that stuff there. All I knew that in my spirit, what was being done to me wasn't right. And it affected me in that way. And as I grew up, coming along, we did the little things that the kids do. We got in the little troubles that they got in. We would make berry wine, and we would do all of these things. But it was when I entered the 9th grade, and I remember sticking 2 white pieces of paper together, folding them, putting a green leafy substance in the 9th grade. And I remember lighting it up at one end in the ninth grade. And I inhaled that smoke in the ninth grade. And when I blew that smoke out, I was a senior in high school. I don't remember doing nothing else but chasing that same feeling that I got. I remember the first time I spoke something, it made me laugh. I could not stop laughing. But the last thing I spoke made me cry. I always like to remember that it was fun in the beginning. And then the euphoria wore off, and I got to the ugly side of addiction. And that took off after high school, like coming up with a score on my SAT because I cheated. I copied somebody's paper, half of it, and I tried to guess the other half so I can just get an average score. But the problem was I copied correctly, but when I guessed, I got lucky and I guessed a lot of answers right. So now I got a score that's going to the guidance counselor that they can't believe, that they didn't realize in their mind I had this kind of talent. So they called me in, they apologized for not paying attention to me like they should have, and pushing me and encouraging me. So now they're talking about all of these colleges. They're looking at my SAT score. And it was at that time I decided to join the United States Navy because they was about to find out I was dumber than a box of rocks. I didn't know anything. And I remember going into the military, and it was fun. My first duty station was Pearl Harbor, Hawaii. They had a lot of exotic birds. The island was beautiful. They had the hula dances. Everything was exotic until I ran up on those exotic drugs that they had in Hawaii. And after I ran up on those exotic drugs, it wasn't nothing else on that island exotic to me. That disease took off. That I lived to use and I used to live at that time. I started chasing the drugs. And no matter where I went in the military, I found the drugs no matter where I went. And I did 4 years in, and I came back home to Columbia, South Carolina, to that same corner that I left those same guys on, doing the same thing they were doing. And I fell back into that trap. And at that time, I made a decision, this is not working for me. I didn't know that it wasn't Columbia, South Carolina, it was me. But I thought it was home, so I decided to go back into the military, but I was going into the United States Army at this time. And I failed to realize that one thing, that no matter where I went, I took myself with me. The disease went with me. And I went into the Army, and it was all right in the beginning. I was doing real good. Now I'm climbing up the ladder. I'm an E6 in the United States Navy. I got 11 years in, 9 years before retirement. I get stationed back at Fort Jackson, South Carolina. And when I got stationed back there, once again, TQ, I went back to that same corner where those same guys were 11 years later doing that same thing. And I felt the need to show them how good I'm doing. And I found out one thing for sure. They would get me high before I got them straight. And I remember being with a friend of mine, and I was snorting drugs, and he was using them intravenously. And I remember him picking up that needle once, and he said, Michael, whatever you do, don't stick this needle in your arm. But I didn't want to hear that at that time because I was buying all the alcohol, I was buying the drugs, and I wanted to do it my way and look like he was enjoying it so much that I wanted to try that. And once again, my disease started spiraling down, around and around. It got worse. I was living to use and using to live, but I was doing good. I was justifying it that I wasn't like them on that corner. I was in the military, until they told me to line up one day. We were about to take a urinalysis test. And I want to tell you how serious this disease is. I knew I was going to come up positive because I had the drugs in me. But I actually heard these people say in a conversation after the urinalysis test that we got the results that came back. They said we got 7 people positive and one of them is an E6. I knew they was talking about me. I also heard them say there was a flaw in the test. They had to send to Fayetteville, North Carolina to have more tests sent back to retest us. And at that time, overhearing this, I figured I got it made. I hadn't got high in 2 days for fear of them catching me. It was going to take 3 days for this test to get back. That would be 5 days without using any drugs. And I'm talking about my disease was so powerful that the night before this test, I knew I had to take. I convinced myself that maybe, just maybe they won't find it in my system. There's a difference in the dressed up lie and the naked truth. I was living on the dressed up lie. And once again, I came up positive, and I was put out of the military. And I remember at that time, I didn't know what I was going to do, but my disease told me, you're going to do whatever it takes to get one more. And I started, not help me with this, it is a shame that it was the furniture store that I started working for. I'm not going to call the name of the furniture store, but I made that furniture store my furniture store, okay? Everything they sold out the front door, I was selling out the back. And a lot of days I outsold them on the furniture, trust me. But the more I sold and the more money I made, the more drugs I did. It went on and on and on. And I remember sitting on, I'm to the point where I'm not even going to work. And I remember they called, and my mother was so concerned, and we were sitting on the porch, and she was crying, and she was saying, son, what's wrong? And I was saying, Mom, I don't know. I don't know. But I remember going into treatment at that time because I couldn't stand seeing my mother cry. And I need to say that it is important for anybody who's going in recovery to make sure you're going for the right reason. Even though I meant well, it was just 28 days of taking a break. And I came back out and I continued to do the same thing time and time again. As my disease progressed, it didn't get any worse. I'm talking about to the point of where I'm sleeping in abandoned cars. I'm watching the man at the Chinese restaurant put the food out in the garbage can. I figure if I can get to it soon as he put it in there, it won't be like eating out of the garbage can. I'm trying to convince myself that it's all right with what I'm doing. I'm living what's called an animalistic life. I had lost the ability to even feel, and that continued on and on. And I remember I'm gonna tie two things in together as I go here. I was going to buy some drugs one day, and we rode past this building, and some guys came out, and my friends made a point, laughing at me, saying, Mike, you need to go over there where them guys are. They were coming out of a little church, and the church said, Word of God, Church and Ministry. I remember reading that. They were on Sharp Road. And we laugh, I laugh, because I'm going to get me some crack. I'm not thinking about that kind of mess. And as that time went on and my disease progressed, I thank God for this. My disease progressed. It was like a month or 2 months later, I was at labor finders. And I went to go to work on a Sunday. And when I got down there, it was closed. And I was upset because this is how I was going to make my hustle for the day to get high. And it started, at that time, the skies opened up and it started to pour down raining. And I saw the bus coming. I had enough to catch the bus. And I ran to the bus stop and I was out of breath. And I held my hand up for the bus to stop. And the bus rolled past me. And I looked at the bus. And on the side of the bus, it wasn't a city bus. On the side of the bus said, Word of God, Church and Ministry. And that was the second time I saw that. I'm going to fast forward a little bit to July 11, 2005. When I had became really sick and tired of being sick and tired. TK, I need to tell you that I was sleeping in this abandoned car and my clothes was on the back of an El Camino. It's only one seat. And clean clothes was something that I took off the back of the car to put on the ones off I had. I slept and I did everything in this car. Everything you think of. But over the steering wheel, I had a Bible. I was trying to hold on to the little bit about God that was in my life. And that worked fine one day till a piece of crack fell behind that. And, I tore all of that down. And I remember when I did that day, I felt the abandonment of what I thought that God abandoned me. I thought that. But that day, that Sunday, I remember it was around 2 o'clock. July 11, 2005, the temperature was like 98 degrees outside, and I had on a coat. I was pouring down sweat. My feet were so stank that when you take off your shoes, my toes would stick together. We used to call it toe jam growing up. My toes were stuck together. I always say that if they had to open the doors to First Nazareth Church, which was across the street from where I was, And the smell would have went in there, it would have killed everybody in there. It was that thing. When I was scratched, the skin would come off in my fingernails. And I remember that day I cried out to God. And I went and I slept 3 nights in Finley Park. I got a bed in the Salvation that Wednesday. And that Thursday they had an NA meeting there. And I went to that meeting. And the name of the meeting was amazing. The name of the meeting said, "The healing starts here." The healing starts here. And that's really important when we talk about the process of recovering and healing. See, healing starts on a person when you can admit the part you played in your own suffering, not what somebody else did. I had to admit the part I played in my own suffering. And I remember going to that meeting. And it was very inspiring. I was hearing a lot of information. They was telling my story and things were going. And then I decided that, God, if this is it, help me through this process. And I remember going to that meeting that Thursday, Friday. Now that's Sunday. I woke up at the Salvation Army and I came outside and I had on some clean clothes and I was standing out there in the walkway and I stretched, I yawned. Oh, and as I yawned, TQ, I looked to my left. And outside the gate, there was a bus pulling up. And the bus said, "Word of God, Church and Ministry." And I said, "Okay, Lord, you ain't got to tell me no more." And I remember getting on that bus. And I got on that bus. And I remember going to that church. I don't know what the message was it got about. I love Bishop Davis to death. I don't remember the message. All I remember was walking in there. And they were singing the song, "Let the glory of the Lord rise among us." And I took that to heart that no matter what I do or what situation, it was like I was being ministered to. Whatever I had been through, the glory of the Lord was going to rise above it. Everything was going to be forgiven. And I started that process of recovery at my church and going to those meetings. Like they were coming together in my life. And I need to tell you that things started to change in my life. Listen, the first 30 days, I had a little money in my pocket. My skin had done lighten up a little bit. I done got fine now, TQ. I done buffed up from 95 to 105 pounds, and I was feeling good. My first honest $30. I'm telling you about this process and what it meant to me. My first honest $30. I went to Family Dollar. And I bought me some brand new clothes from Family Dollar. I bought the little white short set with the white hat and those tennis shoes with the red and white pleather on the side. It wasn't leather, it was pleather. And I had on my new clothes and I went and I got to that meeting early because I wanted everybody to see my new clothes. 18 years later, I don't know if they was laughing at me or with me, but I felt good about having on something new. And I began that process and I started learning things like the first thing I had to do was to admit that I had a drug problem, and that was really important. And once I came to admit that, then the process began that I had to be insane or being involved in this. It's like doing drugs is like, would you go up to someone and say, "Excuse me, may I please have a heart attack?" That's just something there's nothing to do. But that's what it was, chasing the drugs. You know what I'm saying? And the second step talked about being restored to sanity. First, I had to admit that I was insane in order to be restored to something. But my life started to change just with those things there. In the process, listen, I learned something that, okay, I don't know how to do this. It's about just asking for help. You got to learn to reach out to people. I remember hearing the story once, and it said, 3 men were in the boat, and this man of faith left something in his car. So he stepped out the boat and he walked across the water and got what he needed, and he walked back across. And as he was walking across the water, the second man was amazed by him walking on the water. And he said, "That man has great faith." He said, "My faith is just as strong as his." So when the man got back in the boat, the second man stepped out on the boat to walk across the water, sunk to the bottom and drowned. And the first man looked at the third man. He said, "If he would have just asked, I'd have told him where the rocks were." So this process is about asking for help. Yeah, you got that, TQ. All right. Just ask somebody, how you do this, how you make meetings, how you reach out to people, how you not use, teach me about changing people, places, and things. It's really important. I can't go to those places that I used to go to. The Bible says, "Flee from the mere presence of evil." Sometimes you just got to run for its run. But because of this, I went from staying in the abandoned house and cars, and to getting a job, getting certified as a phlebotomist. I was working at South Carolina HIV/AIDS Council. My life started to change. I started working at Loretta, working with people who were out there in the streets trying to find recovery and doing those necessary things, that the things that I do for other people also benefit me. I don't ever want to forget what the process done. I don't ever want to forget where I was. I don't ever want to think that I'm long past it. I understand deliverance. I have been delivered from drugs. I am a recovering addict. But I understand that the disease, like the Bible says, that no sin overtaketh a man except that which is common. It ain't gonna, when I think my disease is a long way away from me and I have escaped, all I gotta do is get in my car and look at that mirror on the outside of my car. That mirror reminds me of the disease of addiction. There's some writing on that mirror, and that writing says that objects may be closer than appear. I know that it's just right there waiting on me to make a slight mistake. So what I do is I practice these principles that I've learned in there. I reach out to other people. I make myself available to help others. I am not perfect in no way, shape, or form. I've learned that we are so perfectly imperfect. But thanks that I have a forgiving God who has guided me in the process and find a reason to use me. I believe in my church. I work here. I'm a frontliner. And then the frontliners, men on fighting a spiritual battle on the front line. And I just want to touch on that for a minute. Men out there who are listening, who is in this process of recovery. We talk about three things in recovery: the spiritual, the mental, and the physical. And we always tap into the spiritual and the mental part. But men, as men, if you're going to be a frontline, if you're going to assume the responsibility of a man and get off the drugs, then there are other things you need to do. You need to make a doctor appointment. You need to check out your health. What kind of damage have I done during this process of being out there on drugs? Because I'm no help to my family if I'm not taking care of myself. So I would encourage men to not be afraid, because we as men, we are stubborn when it comes to going to the doctor. But we need to do those things because it doesn't just benefit us. It benefits our wives, our children. And, and it helps us get back on the road of recovery. That's part of the road of recovery. So I always like to say at the end that just for the day, I'll be unafraid. My thoughts will be on my new association, people who are not using, who have found a new way of life. And so long as I follow that way, I have nothing to fear. I'm an addict in recovery. My name is Michael Robertson. I am really grateful for this opportunity I had to spend this little time with you all. And I'd like to end with this. I'm not on here just to say this little speech or let y'all hear my story. Like I said, I'm trying to impress you, but I want to leave an impression on you that this process works. And if there's a man out there who's listening to this, who's afraid or don't know how to do this process, all you got to do is contact TQ. If this is something you do, listen to their Zoom process, you find him. She has my number. I make myself available to men and women who want to seek this process of recovery. This is not just about telling the story. This is about me reaching out to someone who wants help, and I'll be able to make myself available. It's a good day to be clean, y'all. Thank you for the opportunity to share. Thank you, TQ.
Mr. Michael, wow. Thank you so much. That was such just from my perspective, that was an awesome journey just to hear how far you have come, and just your energy and your vivaciousness and your passion is so contagious and is so admirable. And I commend you, and I pray that the God will continue to cover you and guide you down the path that he has for you. So this journey has just listening to your journey has been an enlightening to me. And thank you again. And the whole purpose of this is to, teach somebody, to help somebody, to uplift somebody. Somebody's story can help the other person. And that is the reason why I am doing these series, so that maybe you said something that's relatable to somebody else and said, hey, Mr. Michael made it, I can make it too. And so people have to know that, just because you're in a pit, you can always end up in the palace, right? And so thank you again, Mr. Michael. Um, and I appreciate you sharing your story. And thank you, everybody, for watching and listening.
All right. Have a good day.